Blog Talk Radio.
It is time for House Talk pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts. I got my two men extraordinaire with me, Jared Johnson from Boise State, Ronnie Branson from Virginia State. Keep telling y'all my man-child Andre Garlick is going to join us during basketball season, barring anything unforeseen. Dre will be joining us, and we're so excited. We are so excited to be bringing you pregame every Saturday because for us it's all about family. It's all about our family. It's all about the black and brown community of family all across the nation and all around the world. And it's about our HBCU families, y'all. We are showing much love to the HBCU family, to our student and professional athletes, and to their families. We are excited because we are expanding our listening audience. We've been telling you for the past few weeks that we're also on Heritage Sports Radio Network at this same time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can catch the rebroadcast on Heritage Sports Radio Network at 10 o'clock at night on Saturdays. But guess what? We're now on HSRN on Sundays at 6 o'clock in the evening, too. So there is absolutely, positively no excuse why you all can't tune in for pregame and check us out every Saturday and now every Sunday too. Jared, take us away. We can't hear you, baby. What happened?
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Talking about good morning, everybody. Glad to have y'all back. You know, we're definitely excited for another House Talk pregame. Revamped, renewed, just like we always mention. And we're here to break everything down for you guys, give you guys what we're going through, what we're thinking about, what's on our mind as we share some of our experiences. Shout out to Ronnie, got his master's, child on the way, you know, doing it big, representing the HBCUs the right way. But we're going to have a great show today.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Great show today. Have a great topic coming up. Be transparent as possible as we can. Give you guys raw truth, knowledge, help you guys, again, have an outlet every weekend that you can come to hear real people with real experiences and real opinions. Take it to you, Rodney.
All right, thank you, Jared, and good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's having a blessed Saturday so far. So, look, each week we enjoy the engagement we've been having so far, the questions, the comments, the sharing everybody's opinions and whatnot. So, look, throughout the show today, call in with your questions at 515-605-9744. You can email your questions, comments, or concerns to htpregame@gmail.com. And now you can also hit up Dr. Pitts on her Facebook Live and comment on there as well with your questions or comments during the show as well. So we want to hear from everybody. We're going to have a great discussion today. So back to you, Dr. Pitts.
So, look, one of the things that's a big deal to us here at Pregame is making sure that you, our listening audience, and now our viewing audience are aware of what's going on in our communities concerning mental health. We know that in black and brown communities that there's the stigma associated with mental health, but guess what? That doesn't make it go away. Acting like it doesn't exist is not a cure. So what we pride ourselves on doing week in and week out is providing you with a diagnosis of the week, where Ronnie and I, because we are mental health practitioners, we give you some knowledge. We share with you additional information that can help you to stay aware so that you can make a well-informed decision about your own mental health or the mental health of a loved one. Or even for those of you out there that might be educators or coaches, you might see somebody in your classroom or on your team that's acting a little strange, and you're like, what is going on? So we provide this knowledge because we want to make sure that you have the appropriate information so that whether you're in trouble or someone that you care about is in trouble, you can be supportive and get yourself or that person the help that they need. So our diagnosis for this week is autism spectrum disorder. Now, a lot of people, you know, you may or may not know somebody that has autism, but what we're learning is that it's definitely more prevalent than what we originally anticipated. And I actually have a couple of clients that have autism. And I'm going to tell you, I was apprehensive because I have some relatives that are autistic, ranging in age from small children up into those that are in their teen years now. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge to deal with, but it can be appropriately managed with the right support systems in place. But because I had never worked with anyone on the spectrum before, I was really concerned as to whether or not I would be able to do the clients that I have appropriate service. And my clinical director said, straight up, Lauren, how will you ever learn to manage this disorder properly if you don't take on clients that have the disorder? So I want to thank you to Kelly Hatton for challenging me to come out of my comfort zone. So when it comes to autism spectrum disorder, there are persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect, to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. There's also noticeable deficits in nonverbal communication behaviors used for social interaction, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures, to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. There's also noticeable deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting to behavior to suit various social contexts, to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends, to absence of interest in peers. One of the things that I notice in working with children that are on the spectrum is that piece that we talk about, y'all, with the emotional piece, it's very, very difficult for some children that are on the spectrum to recognize the emotions of others. So that's where we get into those boundary violations, right? So you might have a child who is on the spectrum who, if I can just keep it real, who is really, really, really challenging the parent. And what I mean by that is the parent is having difficulty managing some of the behaviors of the child, and the parent may yell at the child because they, one, might not know that the child is on the spectrum, so there hasn't been a formal diagnosis yet, or they haven't had the appropriate support and training that they need to be able to properly manage the child's behaviors. So they're treating the child as if this child is developing normally, and the child is unresponsive to that. The child is looking at them like they slap crazy because they're like, they don't know. They just know they're yelling. They don't know why they're yelling, and it literally, it's like, shoo, it's going over their head. The other thing is, because there's such difficulty in some of these children that are on the spectrum in truly being able to make the connection, they're oftentimes not able to make the connection that mommy or daddy is yelling or my caregiver is yelling because I did something unacceptable or inappropriate. The other thing that I want to point out is that with some of the children that are on the spectrum, there's this, what's the word I'm looking for, Ronnie? There's this repetitiveness. There's a repetitiveness in how they do things, and routine is very, very important to them. So in the case of COVID, the children that I have on my caseload, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy.
Yeah,
it has been
ruined
a challenge to manage these behaviors because their routine has been all types of disrupted and discombobulated. And as we know, the parents are disrupted and discombobulated. Everybody disrupted and discombobulated, right? So the ability that the parent once had to manage some of these behaviors that come up appropriately or with patience, they're struggling to do that now because everybody has been stretched beyond their limit. And oh, by the way, this child is suffering greatly because their routine has been disrupted. Another thing that we see with children that are on the spectrum is that they have sensory challenges. And what we mean by sensory challenges is they're extremely sensitive to textures and sounds and certain feelings. Like one of my clients walks on their tiptoes, right? Being able to walk flat-footed, can't stand the way that the ground or the carpet or the pavement feels on the bottom of the foot. So to avoid that sensation that's affecting the bottom of the feet, the child walks on the tiptoes. So a number of things, it's extensive. Ronnie will get into some treatment efforts and some things that should be considered for monitoring and screening. Ronnie?
Yeah, so and to your point, Dr. Pitts, working with autistic clients is definitely challenging. For me personally, it's probably my favorite group to work with in mental health. I've actually had, I think maybe so far, I've had like 6 or 7 clients who have been autistic so far in my mental health professional career. Mm-hmm. And each one has their own set of unique challenges and different things. But to your point about the repetitive behaviors, one of the things I like the most about working with autistic children and adults is those repetitive behaviors bring out talents and things that you just don't see all the time. And it just blows my mind. Like I had this one client who was 16 years old, and it was so crazy. Like he literally knew every DMX song word for word.
Wow.
His whole catalog. At 16, it blew my mind. Like he was telling me how his mom would listen to DMX and 90s rap and stuff like that, and he just fell in love with DMX. And you could just name a song from an album, and he would just start rapping it. And it was so cool. And to your point about the sensory perception, that is something that I think oftentimes if you have a child or you have a teenager or an adult that you're taking care of who is autistic, that part right there is probably the most difficult part for somebody who isn't autistic or somebody who doesn't work with autistic people. That's a hard thing for them to understand because that sensory thing is very, very challenging sometimes. I have a client who's very sensitive to yelling. So anytime somebody raises their voice outside of just normal speaking level, he instantly, his anxiety just shoots up. He just instantly gets scared. He starts, looking around. He gets nervous and everything like that because just the yelling is so much louder to him. Yeah. So, and one other thing I want to get to talk about real quick for people, because when we talk about autism, so prior to 2013, when the American Psychiatric Association came out with the 5th edition of the DSM, in the 4th edition of the DSM, autism was broken down into 4 different diagnoses, that being autistic disorder, childhood disintegrative disorder, pervasive developmental disorder, and Asperger's syndrome. A lot of people might be familiar with the Asperger's syndrome, and typically when we talk about Asperger's, that's what we would consider higher functioning of autism. So when we talk about the spectrum is literally from low end, which is, maybe nonverbal, non-cognitive and stuff like that, all the way to what used to be Asperger's is high functioning. If you didn't know their diagnosis, you probably wouldn't know they were autistic unless they told you that level of high functioning. Now, back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I think it was 1 in 4,500 for every child who was diagnosed with autism. As of, I think, the recent studies in 2018, it's 1 in 10. So autism is becoming more heavily diagnosed. Unfortunately, I've also seen that it's becoming more heavily diagnosed in the, African American population as well as other people of color. That's a more political discussion we can have about that for another time. However, autism, while there is no necessarily cure for autism, there are treatments that can make the process a lot more less stressful and less difficult to deal with, because as a family member, when you have somebody who's diagnosed with autism, it can be very challenging, like Dr. Pitts said. It's a day-to-day thing. Every day is a new day. It's a new battle. It's a new adventure. But, there are still things out there that can help you with that. One of the main things of treatment for autism is what we call ABA therapy, or applied behavioral analysis. Now, applied behavioral analysis, which also can be called behavioral engineering, is a scientific technique concerned with applying empirical approaches based upon the principles of respondent and operant conditioning to change behavior of social significance. All of that is a fancy way of saying that ABA therapy basically helps children and adolescents and adults with autism basically learn how to operate socially in everyday life. And, you're basically teaching, this set of population how to function in society, how to function on a day-to-day basis, how to make everyday decisions, and eventually learn how to become independent once they become an adult. Because the higher functioning you are for autism, there is a possibility that you can have an independent life, go on about your day, and everything is fine. But there still will be some challenges. Some other form of treatment, of course, you have behavioral cognitive therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy. I got my words mixed up. You got CBT therapy. You got psychotherapy. Now, as far as medications go for autism, there is not one specific medication for autism. And something else we typically see is that typically children who they suspect might have autism or do have autism typically have other diagnoses attached with it, whether it's ADHD, ODD. You can even in some instances have things like social anxiety disorder, general anxiety, separation anxiety disorders, even as far as depression as well. So there's other different diagnoses that can be attached along with autism. So what I like to tell clients and parents of those clients who have autism is the medication isn't geared towards the actual diagnosis. It's geared towards the behaviors, the symptoms of that diagnosis. So if you're having a kid who's autistic and they have ADHD and things like that, they might get prescribed something like Adderall or Clonidine or something like that to address the ADHD behaviors and things like that. Other treatments, now, depending on what state you live in and things like that, like here in Virginia has several autism centers throughout the state where it's kind of like a very intensive program. Some of the programs are 5 days a week, 3 hours each evening for, I think, at minimum 6 months. And basically, they come in your house, they sit down with you and your child, and they give you a whole bunch of resources and tools and coping skills and interventions that you can practice on a daily basis with your child and the family. Because the biggest thing to take away from this is if you have a loved one who has autism, you as the caregiver or family member, it's just as important for you to know everything about autism as it is the actual client, because they're going to need your support more than anything. They're going to need that support every single day. Things will get repetitive. Things will get redundant and monotonous, but you have to realize that this person who's affected by this diagnosis is doing the best they can. They're trying to learn, to break through that anxiety that they already have on themselves to be social and things like that. So depending on what state you live in, you can look up autism centers throughout your state. Of course, Psychology Today is a great website. The National Institute of Health is another great website to find autism centers. And one other thing for parents, because like me and Dr. Fitz were talking about, COVID affecting a lot of, people with autism. I have several kids with autism on my caseload, and I can let you know right now, this virtual learning has not been helpful at all for them. And several of my clients have what we call IEPs, which are individual educational plans. So parents, if you're out there, if your child has an IEP through their school and they're doing virtual learning, make sure that the school is still giving them their accommodations. That is a legal binding contract that you and the school sign together that says the school is going to give your child the accommodations necessary to help them with their education. Even despite it being virtual, these children still need to have their rights met. So if you have a loved one who has an IEP, especially if they have autism, please check in with the school to make sure they're giving your child the accommodations they need. Because a lot of kids are struggling with virtual learning, especially kids with autism, because they need that person being right there beside them to help them with their education, to help them with their academics and things like that. And simply throwing it through a computer, even if it's one-on-one tutoring, is not always the most effective thing in the world. So those are all my treatments and resources for autism. Dr. Pitts, is there anything you want to add to that?
I do, because as you were talking, I was thinking a couple of things that it's important for our listeners and viewers to know, that there is a difference between an educational diagnosis of autism and a medical diagnosis of autism. And within the context of that IEP and that 504 plan, parents and caregivers need to understand the difference. Having a medical diagnosis of autism that goes along with the educational diagnosis will open up opportunities for additional resources for your child. A lot of people don't know that. They think that, oh, well, the educational diagnosis, that should be, no, there's more. In order to be able to take advantage of some of the community resources that are available, it is beneficial for you to be able to have a medical diagnosis of autism for your child as well. And your primary care physician should be able to help you. I know that there are typically psychologists and some psychiatrists within the hospital systems all over the country that actually have staff members that can conduct that appropriate assessment to be able to provide a medical diagnosis of autism for your child, so that you can have access to the additional community resources that are available as well. The other thing that I wanted to point out is professional athletes and celebrities that have autism and have gone on to do extraordinary things in their respective sports. The actor and comedian Woody Allen, David Byrne, Dan Aykroyd, Charles Darwin, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Daryl Hannah, Alfred Hitchcock, Courtney Love, Lionel Messi, Sir Isaac Newton, Steve Jobs, Jerry Seinfeld. There are some of those that actually have formal diagnosis, and some of them are rumored to have been diagnosed with autism. Jessica Jane Applegate, she's a swimmer. Michael Brannigan, he's track and field. David Campion, snowboarder. Brianna Clark, Paralympic athlete. Ulysses Del Sol, race car driver. Tommy Disbrisa, runner, kayaker, and cross-country skiller. Jim Eisenreich, Major League Baseball player. The reason why I thought it important to reference that, one, because we're House Talk pregame, because we certainly, but more importantly, we don't want anybody to have the idea that because your child has an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis that they can't go on. I actually have a friend, one of my closest friends, actually has a child who is on the spectrum, and to your point, Ronnie, about the areas that they're gifted in and they can excel, this child, soccer and golf, OMG, a beast. You hear me? That's what he excels at. Yep, that's what he excels at, and he is a senior in high school now. He is going to be graduating with a diploma. Just an extraordinary young man. So don't think for a moment that just because your child has a spectrum disorder diagnosis that that's going to limit them from being able to be successful and do extraordinary things. It's all about appropriate treatment, and it's all about appropriate support. And do not settle for the school district slamming the door in your child's face and not providing you all the support that the law says that you're entitled to. If you have a problem, I need you to call me so that I can steer you in the right direction to get the appropriate support that you need in the geographic region where you are. Jared, you can lead us off with the shout-outs.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all again. And just to hit on that, when y'all were talking, I think it's, even though I'm not a professional in that field, but like all kids that are autistic and have to deal with online schooling, and then with their parents that maybe work at Walmart or somewhere that has to be open, I can imagine it's even tougher for them to focus because there's nobody at home sometimes to help them do that. And that goes for any kid with COVID also. So hopefully they can get back in there safe in school with no illnesses or anything. But, yeah, we're going to move on to the shout-outs to our HBCUs. I'm shouting out two today. My first one is Clinton College. It's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. It was founded as Clinton Institute in 1894. And in 1909, it was incorporated as Clinton Normal and Industrial Institute. In the post-war era, from the late 1940s into the 1960s, the school saw a lot of significant growth, which and then
Hold on, Jay. Hold on.
Good.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. But, yeah, they saw a lot of significant growth between the 1940s and the 1960s, and they changed their name to Clinton Junior College when the charter was amended to offer the school associate degrees. They later added 4-year programs in 2013, and they now offer bachelor degree programs in biology, business administration, and religious studies. They're a part of the National Junior College Athletic Association, and they have men's and women's basketball, and they also have a cheerleading squad. So it is a junior college. They don't have a lot of sports, but if somebody's looking for a historically black-owned junior college to go to, Clinton College is definitely on the list in Rock Hill, South Carolina. The second college is Simmons College. It's a private HBCU in Louisville, Kentucky. It was founded in 1879, and Simmons College is the 107th HBCU. In 1865, 12 black Baptist churches met at a Baptist church in Louisville, and they organized a state convention of colored Baptist churches in Kentucky. And they felt because there was no place in the state for blacks to obtain an education, there was a need to create a school that educated Negroes, which a lot of them were actually first generation, one generation removed from slavery. And they wanted to focus on academic, research-based faith approach to the community involvement, interaction, and development. They have non-degree programs, which include a certificate and a diploma in Christian ministry studies. Degrees also include Bachelor of Theology, a Bachelor of Arts, and an associate degree. And they actually have men's and women's basketball teams as well. And 2006 and 2007 season was the first year that the school actually sponsored any athletic programs. So they had a huge gap right there. And some notable alumni are Tisha Gilbert. She's the first African-American woman physician in Kentucky. Arenia Mallory, the educator and civil rights activist. Samuel Plateau, an architect. And W.J. Simmons, ex-slave, who was the college's second president and namesake. So that's Simmons College and Clinton College for the shout-outs.
All right. So the two schools I'll be doing, the first one is what I would call Little State, but for everybody out there, I'll call them Norfolk State University. Norfolk State is located in Norfolk, Virginia. The institution was founded on September 18th, 1935 as the Norfolk unit of Virginia State University. In 1942, the school tried to become independent of VSU and was named Norfolk Polytechnic College. However, within 2 years of it becoming independent by an act of the Virginia legislature, it became a part again of Virginia State College, which is now Virginia State University. However, in 1969, the college divided from Virginia State and was named Norfolk State College. And then in 1979, by the General Assembly of Virginia, it changed its name to Norfolk State University. Norfolk State currently plays in the MEAC conference for both men's and women's sports. They have football, basketball, track, cross country, baseball for the men. They have softball, basketball, tennis, cross country, and track for the women. Some of the notable alumni are actor Tim Reed, who was the father on Sister Sister. And another fun fact, he actually lives 10 minutes from me, him and his wife, who was the light-skinned Aunt Viv on Fresh Prince. They live in Petersburg, Virginia, and have lived there for, I believe, a good while, I think, even after they had finished their acting days. And then another actor and comedian, J.B. Smoove, is another notable alumni. Norfolk State has had 23 players to play in the NFL, with 17 of them being drafted. They've recently had 2 players in 2016, Lyndon Trail and Deion King. They played several years in the NFL. I think Deion King played for the Colts and the Chargers, and Lyndon Trail played for the Houston Texans and the New York Jets, I believe. So shout out to Little State, a.k.a. Norfolk State. Shout out to you all. And then my second college is Lemoyne-Owens College. So they are located in Memphis, Tennessee. They are Memphis's only historically black college. In 1862, the American Missionary Association sent Miss Lucinda Humphrey to Camp Shiloh to open an elementary school for freedom and runaway slaves after the occupation of Memphis during the Civil War. The school, named Lincoln Chapel, was moved to Memphis in 1863, but was destroyed by fire in the race riots after the withdrawal of federal troops in 1866. The school was rebuilt and reopened in 1867 with 150 students and 6 teachers. Their first years were challenging due to the death toll that was caused by the yellow fever epidemic that took place on campus and in Memphis. In 1914, the school was moved to its present site on Walker Avenue, and the first building, Steele Hall, was erected on the new Lemoyne campus. Lemoyne became a junior college in 1924 and then a 4-year college in 1930. So the other part of that school, Owens College, was established in 1947 when the Tennessee Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention bought property on Vance Avenue to build a junior college. The school opened in 1954 with 33 students, and it did not say on the school website when they combined the schools, but I'm going to assume it was shortly after that Owens College was built on that same street. So some notable alumni include Marion Barry, who was a former mayor of Washington, D.C., and Ida B. Wells, who was one of the founding members of the NAACP. Lemoyne-Owens College participates in Division II sports. For men, they have baseball, basketball, cross country, golf, and tennis. And for women's sports, they include softball, volleyball, tennis, and cross country. Lemoyne also offers some post-grad opportunity as well in cybersecurity and business administration. So shout out to Lemoyne-Owens College in Memphis, Tennessee.
All right. I am shouting out Albany State University in Albany, Georgia. They're NCAA Division II sports. They have basketball for men. They have basketball, baseball, football, track and field. Women's sports are basketball, softball, tennis, volleyball, track and field. They're known as the Golden Rams, and they compete as members of the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. They were founded in 1903 as the Albany Bible and Manual Training Institution to provide education to African Americans in Southwest Georgia. Albany State is known for its outstanding programs in business and public administration, teacher education, nursing, criminal justice, and the sciences, and continues to provide leadership in academic excellence, social change, and economic impact. In 2017, Darton State College and Albany State University consolidated to become one university under the University System of Georgia. Albany State University has 2 campuses in Albany and a satellite campus in Cordell. Notable alumni, here we go. Ready? Ain't nobody supposed to be broke. Notable alumni, songwriter and rapper Rick Ross, actress Jo Marie Payton.
Oh, wow.
She was a mom on Family Matters.
Rick Ross graduated from that?
Yep. 6 NFL players, 4 NBA players. Most notable NBA player was Caldwell Jones, the former center and power forward for the Philadelphia 76ers. The next school I want to shout out is Mississippi Valley State, and I'm going to spend a couple of extra minutes on here because I was really, really impressed when I was reading about their athletic programs, and I was like, oh, I need to share this with the fellas and the audience. So Mississippi Valley State is in, I hope I'm saying this right, Itta-Bena, Itta-Bena, Mississippi. Mississippi Valley State University is a public, historically black university in Mississippi Valley State, Mississippi, and is the youngest of all historical black colleges. MVSU is a member school of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Mississippi Valley State has a strong history and commitment to the education of black Americans. It is a small institution with an enrollment of 1,517 undergraduate students. But here's what's so impressive, y'all. Their athletic department says the area of athletics fully embraces the university's mission and enacts policies, procedures, and initiatives with both the letter and spirit of that purpose. The administration and staff of athletics espouse a student-centered philosophy which ranks academic achievement as the #1 priority for its athletes. To this end, the Department of Athletics is committed to providing a comprehensive intercollegiate athletic program for men and women that promotes the academic, physical, social, psychological, and total development of student athletes. The athletics program is committed to working collaboratively with other competent, contributing graduates who are capable of making the transition from university life to the workplace and into today's multicultural society. The athletic department is committed to providing public service activities to the community and research opportunities for its coaching staff. Embodied within this mission statement is the concept of an effective athletics program that values the success of the department's student athletes in competition, academic and personal development, and maintenance of full compliance with the rules of the university, the NCAA, and the Southwestern Athletic Conference. The university participates in 10 sports for women, including basketball, bowling, cross country, golf, indoor track and field, outdoor track and field, softball, soccer, tennis, and volleyball, as well as 8 sports for men, including baseball, basketball, cross country, football, golf, indoor track and field, outdoor track and field, and tennis. They have sent 17 players to the NFL, including the one and only Jerry Rice from the San Francisco 49ers, and actor and singer Deacon Jones, and they've sent 3 players to the NBA. Reading about their commitment to that balance of the biopsychosocial, which, clinically for me and Ronnie is everything, I was like, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen an athletic program who articulates as clearly as Mississippi Valley does their commitment to the holistic student athlete. And I just thought that was so commendable, and that we needed to really give them some illumination for that phenomenal approach to the holistic development of their student athletes. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Absolutely. If we have any student athletes, former or current, from that program, we would love to hear from you guys to see so in practice, how does that work? Like, do you, is there a considerable difference in that philosophy? I mean, because just you reading it, I mean, that's amazing that they take that time to really invest in the student. And that's what we've been talking about for the last 3 months, is really investing into these student athletes the way they want us to invest into the schools.
Right, right.
Yeah, if we have any former or current student athletes from Mississippi Valley State that would love to share their experiences with the athletics program, please call in or message us and let us know how that is. Because I think more HBCUs and other schools should take that approach.
How about that? Even the high school levels. That's huge.
Absolutely.
It's just huge.
I have to do some research, try to get somebody on the show from Mississippi Valley. It's funny because they had offered me right after I signed and walked out of my junior college to campus, and I go. That's what that offered me. They weren't that good back then. It was like 1-9 the season before, but I mean, hey, it seems like they do good. They have no choice out their game now with Deion Sanders coming with the Jackson State. You can't. They got to come with it now. But
oh yeah.
So we're going to hop into the show. We have a good one today. Talking about trust is the main topic, and trust is big anywhere, any relationship, whether it's on the field, off the field, spouse, best friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. Trust is number one. So we want to talk about how does trust relate to the athletic field? How does it relate with player and coach, the player and parent? How does trust carry into the academic side?
You went out.
Professor and
there you go.
You're
good. Yeah, we good.
Okay. We're going to focus on trust. Who can student athletes trust? How can creating trust with the NCAA improve the credibility of the NCAA? Also, we're going to hit on who's most responsible for getting these student athletes to college on scholarship. Can student athletes trust the NCAA to make decisions for the athlete's best interest? And also, we want to get into the professional level. Who should our athletes trust to handle their money once they get to the point where they need money management, financial education? Who can they trust? So we're going to talk about all of that, give our experiences. I definitely have some experience I can share with coaches that I feel did it the right way and some that did it the wrong way. So we're definitely going to get into that. What do you guys have any thoughts before we dive into everything on the surface?
As far as trust goes, and especially when we talk about the NCAA, there are some things I want to share about that, and some ironies that the NCAA enforces on student athletes compared to coaches. So yeah, we'll definitely get into that discussion when it gets here. But yeah, when it comes to trust, I always tell people it takes years to build and seconds to break. So. And that goes with student athletes and athletics as well. So, yeah, I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, and it's funny because you said it takes years to build and seconds to break. I think that plays a lot with a lot of kids that, when you're deciding to go to a school and you go through the recruiting process. I mean, some schools can be recruiting you from your 10th grade year. It could be a 3-year process. And over that time, especially if you commit to them early, and we all know coaches get fired, things happen. And what is a player when you trusted a coach and he tells you he's going to be there? They come in your living room, they tell your parents, we're going to take care of you, and then they hit the road and go to another school because they're fired, or they leave because a better opportunity presents itself. And at that point, you wonder, does that mess with the athlete's trust? And I think it does. I was talking to a guy, he actually went to Bowie. He had some Ivy League schools and things like that, but he was going to another school and the coaching staff left. And he said at that point he realized he can't trust any coaches. And now he's bringing that same attitude to Bowie, where it's guarded to his coaches when those coaches at Bowie may be able to step in and give him that trust that he needed. So I think that's a huge layer right there before you even get to college, building your trust with coaches. Like, did you do that, Ronnie, or you were just mainly, like, I'm just trying to get to college, I wasn't really focused on building trust, or did it just naturally happen, before you committed?
Man, so my recruiting process was all over the place, man. Like, because I was getting recruited by a lot of, like, small schools, like a lot of D3 schools and stuff like that. And the D3 school coaches, man, like, I guess because I'm a easy person to get along with. Like, I didn't really have like a lot of expectations and whatnot. The only thing I really was concerned about was like, how is my school gonna get paid for, and what are my chances of actually being able to be on the field as a freshman? Like, what is my actual legitimate shot? And so, those were my questions to schools. And, of course, D3 schools can't give full rides and whatnot. But, they'll sit there and say, well, we got these financial aid packages and stuff like that for you. But one of the things that really stuck out to me with Virginia State and their coaches was they were just real. They were themselves. And, when I went on my visit for the first time to State's campus, I hung out with the offensive line coach at the time pretty much the whole day. And we just chit-chatted about life. He was telling me about, his upbringing and how he got to this point and stuff like that. And we just hit it off. So, for me, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. You know, I try really hard not to let past experiences and things like that cloud my judgment when I meet new people, whether it's with trust and stuff like that. I really try to, you know, just be as open-minded and forthcoming with people as possible. So at that time when I was 18, as far as trusting coaches, like my high school coach, I couldn't trust him at all. Like he had proved to me all 4 years that he couldn't be trusted. And I don't know if I've shared this story on this platform, but I've told many people in the past, when I was getting recruited, you know, we still had to make DVDs and CDs for recruiting.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget it. After my senior season, I had gave my coach like 10 DVDs, and he was like, well, I got these schools calling. I'm going to send out your DVDs and stuff to them. Well, after I'd already signed, you know, my letter of intent to Virginia State, I had just happened to walk in his office, and what do I see in there? All 10 DVDs stacked up on his desk. He had never sent them.
Wow.
And, you know, so I never trusted him from jump. And, you know, he just kept on validating my reasons for not trusting him. So at that point, I don't know, like, I mean, when it comes to, like, trusting coaches, I guess, like, I don't know. I don't know if I really ever put that much trust or faith in the coaches like that, because maybe I just knew, like, this is a business and, you know, I'm trying to get to the NFL. So as long as you're trying to help me on my journey, I got to do my part, you know, just do your part. But, you know, I realized quick at the D2 level, you know, at the D2 level, it's really about who you know and not what you do on the field, you know, because you can be a superstar at the D2 level, but if your coach don't know nobody, then you just pray to God that your tape speaks for itself enough for somebody to, you know, to stumble across it. So I guess that's my initial thoughts about trusting coaches and stuff like that. I never really put too much stock into it because I know they have ulterior motives, and at the end of the day, they're trying to keep, you know, money coming in to feed their family. So they're going to do what they got to do to protect themselves before they protect their student athletes, if you ask me.
So like when it comes to, that's a crazy story that he never sent your stuff out. That's ridiculous. But like, so when it comes to recruitment though, I mean, sometimes in your case, you couldn't trust your coach to help you. And some guys are in that same situation where their coach isn't sending out anything, especially if they're not like the top player on the team. They may be able to go to a D2 or a D3, but some people don't want to invest that time in them. Do you think the trust should be in the coaches to get you recruited, or should the trust be in your parents or your guardian to do the legwork? I mean, that's a whole nother topic right there. A lot of people fall short of and don't get to college because of that.
Absolutely. And I had a lot of teammates. We had a running back my 8th grade year. I didn't get to play with him, but he was one of the top running backs in the state of Virginia. I don't know if you might have heard of him back in 2006, Patrick Mills. We had actually lost to Stonebridge in 2005 up there, but he was state player of the year and things like that. He was another example of a student athlete from Matoka High School where the head coach didn't really, help him with his recruiting process. So what I would tell student athletes now who are in high school and things like that, number one, if this is something that you really want to do, if you really want to go to college to play football or any sport for that matter, number one, make sure your grades are straight. So when coaches come to your school, if you have anything less than a 3.0 and you ain't the next Jerry Rice or Ray Lewis on that field or court, don't even waste your time because they ain't going to talk to you. Once you say anything below a 3.0, they out that door and they ain't coming back. I done had that happen. So, make sure your grades are straight before you even think about that. Number two, for parents need to be educated on the recruiting process and things like that. I know they have the NCAA clearinghouse that kind of gives like general information, but talk to other parents who have had kids go to college and stuff like that for sports. Now you have Facebook groups and things like that for student athlete parents and things like that. So communicate on those posts and things like that and find out what it's really like because, when a coach comes to your house or to your school, they're going to be on their best behavior and they're going to tell you everything you want to hear. Jared, you know this very well, and I'm sure Dr. Pitts, when your son was playing sports, I don't know how far he got into the recruiting process, but if he did, and you're very familiar with it as well, a coach going to tell you everything you want to hear and all that good stuff. But as the parent, I think nowadays with kids having the accessibility to social media stuff, it's a lot easier for them to get seen. So I think it really will fall on the parents and the student athlete to get themselves seen because there's so many avenues. However, the coach will play an important part. Like if you're a jerk or, you know, you're not a good teammate, then the coach is really going to hinder that process because they're not going to lie for you if they don't think they're going to get a benefit out of it. So if you're a jerk to your other teammates or you don't show up to workouts or meetings or, you know, you have disciplinary issues on the team, then your coach really ain't going to help you out. But if your grades are straight, you're a hell of a player, and you're putting yourself out there, at that point the coach should only be able to just reassure all that to when the college coaches call them and ask them about it.
Okay. Were you involved, Dr. Pitts, in the recruiting process?
Minimally. Andre didn't go that route, but my former son, I hate the term stepson, but just for clarity's sake. So my husband's son was heavily recruited, and I had the opportunity to take him for some visits and took him to a combine at Penn State and had an opportunity to speak with some of the coaches. You know, I had mixed emotions about it because certainly there were some conversations that were had that sounded a lot like used car sales conversations to me. And it was, I'm like, yeah, no. And then there were some conversations that really sounded legitimate to me and sounded like there was at least some degree of authenticity in, yes, we want him to come and play for us, but, you know, we also genuinely care. And his situation was unique in that he was in a near fatal car accident. So by the end of his junior year, he had the near fatal car accident his junior year in high school. It was like in May of his junior year in high school. And at that time, I want to say it was like 39 offers on the table. Yep, by the end of his junior year. And he ended up playing his senior year, but he had to play in a halo because he broke his neck and his back. But, he broke his neck and his back. And when I say God bless, God bless. You hear me? Because he is not a quadriplegic today. He went on and played for the University of Oklahoma, and it was an extraordinary process for him. So I have mixed emotions. You know, then I think about how the recruiting process was depicted in movies like, what's the movie with Michael Oher? The Blind Side. I look at how I look at how the recruiting process was depicted in The Blind Side. And then to go way back, I think about an old movie you may or may not be familiar with called Blue Chips with Nick Nolte, Anthony Hardaway, and Shaq, and I forget who the Caucasian boy was, which, you know, we know because that was what the recruitment process looked like at PWI versus, you know, what it might look like. I think that it's like anything. I think it's like you guys said in the beginning, that it's all going to come down to relationships. And I think, truth be told, that education about the recruitment process is going to be paramount because otherwise folks get stars in their eyes. They, particularly with these scholar athletes that are coming from these impoverished situations, and all these promises are made, and folk are hearing, you know, dollar sign. They're hearing, you know, cha-ching. They're hearing the cash register, and, you know, thoughts of sipping lemonade and iced tea and cocktails by their pool in their mansion. And the reality of it is, we know that more times than not, it doesn't play out that way. I think that parents need to be deliberate and intentional about educating themselves about the process. The other point that I wanted to make real quick, and then I'll hush, is we talking about coaches disrupting. That's exactly what happens to my husband. And I think I shared on a previous show, he had some major bumps in the road his senior year that resulted in coach pulling his scholarship, and in the grand scheme of things, blackballing. So whereas he definitely would have had a shot at the league, that didn't happen because he got on the wrong side of the coach, and those conversations were had. And as I said, when he played for Del State, 5 of his teammates went to the league. So, all of that is relevant, and you have to be educated. You have to be educated, and you have to make a well-informed decision and not, visions of dollar signs dancing in your head, cloud judgment.
Absolutely.
That's my parental take on it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And when I was getting recruited and when I went to my first junior college, of course, coaches, they always tell you things, and you get there, it's a little different. I was told, my best friend also was with me, and we were told that we would be a little separate from the school as far as the military, because it was a military institute. And we got there, and it was like we were doing more military stuff than football. So it's up front. It's like you lied to me right there to get me to come out there, and you knew to go back. So that right there canceled out trust. And then when I got to my other junior college, ASA, and I was getting recruited by Bowie, the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, they came up to see me, and we spent about 2 hours, went to get some food and things like that. And I really felt the trust was there because it was a Caucasian man was the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, and the receivers coach was African American. And they were genuine people, really faith-driven about their families, all of those things. So that made me real comfortable to go there knowing I'll be taken care of. And I think when you get on campus, sometimes things get a little different once you get in season, things like that. And you may, as an athlete, be expecting them to speak a certain way. And I remember one game, we were playing Virginia Union, and it was just a game where we were just playing, like, terrible. We were getting beat so bad. And I'm on the sideline, I have the headset, and the offensive coordinator, he tells me, and excuse my French, but he's like, stop acting like a little bitch. That's what he told me on the headset.
Oh, wow.
And we've never had that relationship where, some coaches, they could say some stuff, and it's like, that's coach getting the, but we never had that relationship. And when he said that to me and the way he said it, I didn't even go back in the game because I was so furious at that. And then after that whole game, it got to a point where it was about to be a fight between my brother came on the field. I mean, it was crazy on the field. And from then on, I lost all trust with him because no matter how he got, I never called him out his name. I never disrespected him. But he did that, and everyone heard it on the headset, so no other coaches were mad at me. And then from there on, it was just like it went down our relationship. And I looked at him as somebody that I can trust while I'm at this school. He brought me to his house, all those things. And that happened. So I think a lot of times when you get on campus, you have to kind of prepare yourself. And the reality is, when you get there, it might be different. I could have reacted different as well, but it was in the heat of the game, man, middle of the game. And, from then on, he left and went to another school. And the next offensive coordinator, that's where, like, I had the ultimate trust in him. I can go out there, I can play. I'm not looking over my shoulder. That's when we had our best season at the offense, being right behind Winston with, number 2 offense in the conference. And it was just trust. He spoke to me like an adult. He treated me with respect. And, that's when our athletes can better perform on the field, when you can trust your coach like that. So that's my take on it.
I got a quick question for you, too, before we sort of keep transitioning to address these other questions we wanted to talk about. What does trust look like within the context of your injuries and you all being up to play? Like, do you trust? Were you able to trust your coaches to have your health and well-being as a priority, or was it all? Well, you shaking your head no. or was it all about we got to win this game and you need to get your behind on the field?
Go ahead, Ron.
I'll tackle this one first. So my freshman year at State, and I've said this before on the show, my freshman year at State, I was contending for the left guard and the center position to be the backup for one of them. Because when I got there, I was being recruited to play guard, ended up getting switched to center, which at first I didn't really like or agree with, but I eventually became loved playing center. So broke my foot my freshman year, didn't even play. So as far as like the coach pressuring me and stuff like that, honestly, I was allowed. It actually benefited me a lot because that first semester I was actually allowed to just kind of be a student because I had broke my foot in August. So outside of just showing up for meetings and stuff like that, I was kind of allowed to just do what I needed to do on campus to take care of school. However, going into my junior season when we had our new coaches is when I had my first knee injury when I tore my meniscus. So my junior season, they kind of had me on this. It was a weird schedule. So I tore my meniscus that June, rehabbed all July and August. So during the season, I wouldn't practice during the week. I would just show up on Friday for the walkthrough and then we'll play on Saturday because by the time I finished playing on Saturday, my knee had swelled up again and I couldn't even walk. So that whole season, that was our agreement. I wouldn't practice, but I would play because I was playing at a high enough level. I got all conference that year. I got all American that year with 2 bum knees. Going into my senior season, knees were becoming an issue where it was like I didn't do spring ball going into my senior season because I had 2 surgeries that off season, and then right before the season started again, I had tore my meniscus for the 3rd time in my knee, and so. But by that point, my coach was getting kind of fed up with, I was becoming damaged goods at that point because here I was becoming a senior. And, he was like, this is going to be, I know this is your last year, so we just going to manage through it. However, I didn't get that lofty practice schedule that I had got my junior season. So that whole season on 2 bum knees and 1 torn meniscus, I practiced every day and I played the entire season. And as far as practicing goes, I used to really be teed off because it was if you were around me during the 2014 season, after the game, I couldn't walk Sunday and Monday. I just couldn't walk. I couldn't get in my stance. I couldn't bend down. I just couldn't walk. My knee would hurt so bad. So I would literally spend the whole week trying to get ready for Saturday, but I had to practice again. So it was to a point I was taking 15 ibuprofen a day just to be able to get onto the practice field. And then before games, it was real. And so before games, I would get a lidocaine shot in both knees, and I'll feel like Superman for 3 hours. And after the shot it wore off, I go from feeling like Superman to a handicapped man, for the next couple of days. So that whole season, I didn't resent my coach. I definitely understood why he needed me to practice and stuff because we didn't have we had a backup center, but my playing and his play, it was completely different. There was a noticeable difference on the offense and stuff like that. So I had no choice but to suck it up and play through injury. I knew that was my last year, and I was like, well, I'll deal with the consequences after playing. And so, I didn't resent my coach, but I was definitely hot some days during practice. Yo, you see me out here Jared, I don't know if you ever seen a center when they they'll stand up and look at the defense and try and call audibles and whatnot. I would literally have one leg bent and the other leg would be straight while trying to snap the ball because I couldn't bend my leg from my knee. So under center snaps and stuff like that wasn't happening like that. We did all shotgun and pistol. So my coaches, they did what they felt was in the interest of the team, even if that meant, just shoot me up with. Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, exactly. And I was a full ride student athlete, so what choice did I really have at that point?
Yeah. I think that's a lack of trust in the coach because you would think, all right, I'm gonna just focus on healing so I can be good. But is in the back of your head, somebody's gonna take my spot. So you can't really trust. You can't trust that. You know that's gonna happen. I mean, if you want to look at that situation, like even on the NFL stage with Tyrod Taylor this year, they punctured his lungs by a team for
and lost his spot.
Yeah, and they always say you cannot lose your job to injury. He hasn't seen the field since. He wasn't playing terrible. Punctured his lung. Now he's a backup. Probably not gonna be on the team next year. So where's the trust at? You know what I'm saying? And I mean, he's a black quarterback with a black head coach too. You think because of that dynamic, it will be a little different because people would think generally black quarterback, white head coach, but I mean that's ridiculous. And I think, with injuries, you really can't trust that you'll have your spot back. Unless you're just that guy where you're untouchable for whatever reason. Yeah, other than you can be replaced like easy, and I think that's why you see injuries that continue to linger because guys don't have the trust that even if they miss 3 games to heal and they play the remaining 6, they'll be starting. And you get into my scholarship be taken. That's another trust factor. So I think that there really is no trust. Some guys may feel it depends on the coach and your relationship, but I wouldn't put too much trust in it.
I got another one before, I know the answer, so it's really rhetorical. So, if an athlete in high school is preparing to go to college and they have a formal mental health diagnosis, is it fair to say they can't trust people with that information?
Oh man! Now,
are you rolling the dice on that one?
If a coach were to out somebody's mental health diagnosis, to try and I guess put them on the spot or embarrass them, I don't see how that coach has their job by the end of the day. My last year at State, we had a kid on the team who was a freshman at the time, and he had some mental health issues going on, and his way of expressing those were normally through anger outbursts and stuff like that, and even he had a couple blow up moments with the coaches. However, we didn't know anything about his personal life or anything like that outside of his couple close friends who were on the team. But as far as the team goes, nobody really knew what was going on. And our coach used to always say, when he would have these blow ups, he would always say, he was like, y'all can't judge somebody based off what, they do and stuff like that, especially when you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors.
Right.
And that's how he would always address us when this specific teammate would have, issues on field or during the locker room and stuff like that. He would just tell us, you guys have no idea what this kid has gone through and is going through, so don't judge him, just be there to support him.
Nice.
And I think that's an appropriate response. But if you just out a kid, if they, I guess maybe if it was ADHD or something like that. People joke about ADHD all the time, even though it is a credible diagnosis and things like that, and it can hinder a lot of people's daily lives. But as far as the attention and focus, coaches get on players about attention and focus all the time, especially doing film. Jared, I don't know about you. Well, you probably couldn't afford to fall asleep in a film meeting. But there have been some times.
Look, doing all that other stuff.
So many people fall asleep in the film.
Hey, did y'all used to have morning film meetings at 6 in the morning?
Yeah. You already know somebody.
And they're not. So, I would pray a coach wouldn't do that, because if I was that student athlete and you outed me like that, I'm gonna have to see you, because clearly you're gonna lose your job, but you're gonna have to see me after you lose your job.
Yeah, and then
but,
I think. No, go ahead, finish what you
got to say. Go ahead, Jared. I'm sorry.
And I think that hits on the question on what can the NCAA do to improve the credibility of the NCAA. I think it's holding, like Ron said, holding them accountable. If you do something like that, you should not be a head coach. They should have an interim coach immediately, and I think that's probably really the only way to really improve it. And I think just continuing to, when you first meet with these recruits, to be as real as possible, to be as transparent, and to have coaches open up to their student athletes more about life and share their experience, which I've got a lot of coaches who have done that, and that builds a trust because they may be going through something that you're going through, or they may have went through something that you're going through, and now you see them as a person and not a coach or not somebody that's an authority over you, and then you're able to relate and you're able to understand you as well as a student athlete when you're able to open up to them because, I mean, let's be real, you may be going through something and they may want to just come down on you very, very hard because you drop a pass in practice. But in the back of their mind, they know, all right, this is how he's going to react because of the situation. I need to kind of nurture him a little bit or pull him to the side instead of embarrassing him. Like the mental health aspect. You don't have to call that out in front of everyone. If you know about it, bring them to your office, talk to them, things like that. I think that's how they can best, help that. And then also with the trust, what I hit on comes your performance on the field. And there was, a study that was talking about players who don't trust their coaches or feel that their coaches trust them. It causes them to have negative performance. And 4 of the ways are by jamming, which occurs when the athlete thinks too much, and excessive thinking disrupts muscle memory and interferes with trust, often called paralysis by analysis. Then aiming. This occurs when athletes become overly conscious of a target. And I can relate, as being a quarterback, if you don't trust your coach and you think you're going to get pulled, you're aiming instead of throwing freely at your target, and you're going to be inaccurate. This is excessive preoccupation with the target leads athletes to consciously control their movement. Guiding and controlling. Guiding occurs when athletes try to control their movements as opposed to trusting them. And then forcing. This happens when athletes try hard to get an outcome they want rather than letting it come to them and trusting the process. So as coaches, when you hear that, you should want to build as much trust as possible because you know your players are going to perform on the field and they're going to be comfortable and be able to freelance and things like that. So that's a whole another layer there as well.
Absolutely, man. You made some great points. And to your point about what the NCAA can do for people to trust them, I don't think the NCAA will ever get the trust I guess they want because at the end of the day, the NCAA is an organization and it's a business. And at the end of the day, as long as they're meeting their bottom line, what goes on for student athletes really doesn't matter at that point. As long as the NCAA can meet their bottom line, they're fine. And one of the biggest issues I have with the NCAA, and Jared, you can definitely attest to this. Well, not attest to it, but some teammates who probably went through this, is the whole transfer process. And I think this is something that's talked about every year where, once you become a college coach, whether it's a head coach, position coach, whatever the case may be, you kind of get put into this pool system. And, Jared, I think you've seen this in the CIAA a lot where, like, once you become a coach, you kind of just get recycled through the conferences and things like that, whether you did your job or not. Now, you have coaches who come from small schools who will bring a small school to national prominence and things like that, and then they jump ship. From a coaching standpoint, I can totally understand that. You did your job at this school. You made this school a powerhouse, a perennial power and things like that. You want to prove yourself at the next level. Completely understand that. So you leave that school, you go to the next school. But they don't make you sit out when you sign to that next school. Now, I don't know how many people know this, but the way the NCAA does the transfer process, like, so say, for example, if I were to transfer from Virginia State to Bowie State, I don't have to now, since I went from a D2 school to another one, I don't have to sit out because it's a D2 school. However, because Bowie State's also in the CIAA, I would have to sit out 2 athletic seasons just for transferring into another school in the conference.
And that is crazy.
So if I were to transfer, and check this out, Dr. Pitts. Now, let's say, for example, I went from Virginia State to William & Mary or Hampton University. I would have to sit out a season for transferring up. If I went from William & Mary to Virginia State, or Virginia State to Christopher Newport or Randolph-Macon, which are D3 schools, if you transfer down, you don't have to sit out. But if you transfer up or if you transfer within your conference, you have to sit out a year to 2 years depending on those conference rules. But these coaches can get fired. They can go take another job mid-season or after the season's over with and things like that, and there's no penalty. But people get on student-athletes about taking control of their own life and their own, career and doing what's best for them. And that's one of my biggest issues with the NCAA is because it's like they treat these student-athletes like pawns. It's like, look, here are your rules. These are the guidelines you got to follow. If you get a scholarship, take your scholarship, shut up, go play your ball, whatever you got to do. Don't mess up the system. And,
wow.
I just think that's extremely unfair. And
hard to trust.
Now with everything that's coming around with the name, image, and likeness and stuff like that, I wonder how that'll work for the bigger schools. And I think as far as another thing, Jared, and you can tell me how you feel about this, I think the other thing that NCAA does a very good job of is giving this mirage that all three levels are treated equally when they're not. Well, and when we speak about the NCAA, all we're honestly talking about is those Power 5 conferences, the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and Pac-12. Those are really the only conferences we're talking about when we talk about the NCAA. Everybody else is kind of like, well, you're part of the NCAA, but you'll never get the equal treatment that these conferences get because those are the biggest money-generating conferences. So for somebody like us in, Division II CIAA, the NCAA really doesn't care about how we feel about things and stuff like that, but they treat us as if we're getting these perks already, and we're not.
Yeah. There was an athlete, I think he was at Virginia Tech, and he was transferring to Coastal Carolina, which is, I believe, a D1A or D1AA. I can't remember, but
they're D1A as of this year. This is their first year being D1A.
Okay, so it was a couple of years ago. He was transferring because his mother had cancer, and he needed to be closer to his mother. You heard him, and they didn't.
I remember the story.
And I'm not sure if he ever got it, but it's just like things like that. I mean, how can you trust the NCAA or the coaching staff to have your best interest at heart? So, yeah, I've seen people go through that where they want to transfer, and they don't transfer because they find out, I'm going to have to sit out a year, or I'm going to have to sit out 2 years. So then they're in a bind, in a tough situation, and oftentimes, they stay at that school and they're not happy. And then that just stirs up. Yeah, you was about to say something, Robbie?
Yeah, one other thing I was going to put in there, too, as far as the transfer process goes, and, now if a coach gets fired, those student-athletes that are on that team are allowed to transfer with no penalty the semester following that coach being fired. So, my sophomore season, our coach got fired after the season that fall. So that whole spring semester leading into the fall, we could have transferred if we wanted to with no penalty. And I had actually thought about transferring during that period because I didn't think Virginia State was going to bring in another coach that would want me to stay. They end up doing that. We actually got a really good coach. But you do have that option. But it's crazy how, and even coaches, coaches will sit there, and coaches do care about their student-athletes, and I don't want that to be painted out there that coaches just don't care. They do care because, there are some coaches who are very genuine and genuine and really care, but at the end of the day, like I said earlier, they have a family to feed. They have family to provide for. So at the end of the day, no matter how much they care about you, they'll never care about you as much as they care about themselves and their families. So they're always going to take care of themselves, even if that means tarnishing the relationship they've built with you. And at the end of the day, that's just business. And I think, and to my point earlier about, when you're at the D1 level, there's a lot more perks for you being a student athlete than somebody at the D2 and D3 level. However, coaches still conduct that same business manner and that business mindset no matter the level. The student athletes will be sacrificed first before the coaches ever will be sacrificed.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And one of our coaches at Bowie, Coach Mo, he was the OC my senior year, and that's when the offense took off. And in the next 3 to 4 years, it was like the number one offense in the CIAA. I mean, top 10
in the country too.
Yeah, and it was you could really have trust in him, and that's why I thought I had so much trust in him. But he was getting offers for Division I schools, and he committed to Amir because he had started with him that season. And after that season, he was getting called, and he said, "I'm going to stay here until he graduates," who was the quarterback, and he did it. He was a man of his word, and he ended up going to North Carolina Central after that. So you do have coaches that are going to stand with you and they're going to be in the trenches with you at any time. So I want to say that as well. And then also, when we talking about trusting coaches, before we'll dive into financial stuff next, but somebody got a lot of trust that he got to come through with, and that's Deion Sanders right now, being at Jackson State. I know y'all seen on Instagram. I mean, he's selling like a great image, quality. I hope he does, and I had no reason to think that he wouldn't. But it's like now all of these guys are coming to you like, all right, I'm taking this risk, and I'm leaving my D1. I'm coming to another Division I, but it's HBCU. Like, I'm trusting you to give me the same exact result, and I'm expecting to win. Like, that's major right there. Major right there.
Absolutely. And then, hey, Jared, let me ask you this real quick. So when we're talking about, trusting head coaches and stuff like that, another thing that is kind of overlooked as well is the assistant coaches. Because oftentimes, like, if a head coach decides to leave, especially if they're leaving to go to a bigger program, they might take one or two assistants, but oftentimes – now, some coaches do take their entire coaching staff if they've really built a rapport and stuff like that. But oftentimes you have these assistant coaches, especially at, our level, the D2 level, who aren't getting paid that much anyways, and their future relies on this coach doing his job and hoping that if he does leave, I've built a connection with you that you're going to take me with you so I can get more money. Yeah. And it's like oftentimes, it's either you build a better rapport with your head coach and not the assistant coaches, or you have a better rapport with the assistant coaches and not the head coach. So did you ever feel like your assistant coach, I know you said the quarterback's coach, you definitely had a falling out with him, but did you ever feel like, how they conducted their business would impact how you performed on the field?
It did. Like, after we got rid of the first OC, and it's funny, it all carries back to us, because after we got rid of him, he called me that summer and tried to take me from Bowie to go to Concord. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, no trust or whatever. But, yeah, the trust that the way they carry themselves and the way that I see, the trust that they have within each other, it definitely made me carry out it made me feel better about myself. Like, even off the field, it's like I know I got somebody who has my back. And at the end of the day, I'd rather have that than a coach who's just in it, for his glory and things like that. So, yeah, it's definitely a tough topic. There's a lot to deal with. But for the financial part, with money, I feel like Dr. Fitz maybe, I feel like you got something to say about this. I don't know why, but when it comes to professional athletes with money and trusting people, can they trust their family? Would you suggest family? Would you suggest talking to a coach who's been in that situation, or just going totally south and finding somebody else, to help?
I've said on previous shows that I think that and I don't know for sure, but I think that if the NFL doesn't have financial literacy in place for their athletes, they should. Certainly a number of these athletes, come into the league coming from nothing, from a socioeconomic standpoint. And I think that financial literacy training is imperative in order for them to not be broke, busted, and disgusted when they leave the league. Because the reality of it is that everybody is not going to get a commentator job. Everybody is not going to be on media. And truth be told, everybody doesn't have the business sense to be able to sustain themselves appropriately once they leave the league. Everybody's not getting the endorsements that Jerry Rice and Dak and you have a lot of really powerful players, past and present, that really have some extraordinary endorsements. We were talking about Jonathan Taylor from right in my hometown of Salem, New Jersey, and all of the endorsements that he has. I believe, and I don't know Jonathan and his family, but from everything that I've heard about him, I do believe that it is fair to say that the appropriate people are in his ear so that he understands the significance of making sure that he has a financial advisor that's not going to steal from him, and that, he has someone that can serve as wise counsel for him as far as how he's investing his wealth. Whenever it comes to wealth, I literally always think about some of the celebrities that we've heard about over the years that are very actively involved in their wealth management. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Oprah, even Bill Cosby. There, when you think about shows like Unsung, there's this consistent pattern, right, in the music world where so many folks ended up broke because they didn't have the financial literacy to maintain the wealth or the record deal. Like we saw it in the New Edition movie. Like they just got beat. And I think the same thing happens with athletes. And in order to combat that, I believe the short version of my response now is I think that it starts with financial literacy. And whether they take the initiative to educate themselves through financial literacy training at one of, at the bank at the different banks where they have their money, banks have wealth managers. They have wealth managers. So I am very big on surrounding myself with people who know more than me within certain areas. But here's where it's important. Don't take what they're saying as gospel. Do your research. Do your research to make sure that what the financial advisor, and call it my junk, but I steer clear of financial brokers. Look, bro, you ain't broker. I don't want you touching my money. But
exactly.
Educate yourself. Whatever it is they tell you, don't take it as the gospel. Do the additional research to verify the information from a variety of sources that could be instrumental in helping you to stay educated about wealth management.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying, like, with agents, real quick, I think that's a whole nother, can you trust your agent, you know what I'm saying, to steer you in the right direction? Because I saw Kevin Hart was doing an interview, and he was saying that he ran through all of his money. He was like $750,000 in debt. And he went to ask his agent about some money to purchase something, and his agent said, "What are you talking about? You don't have any more money." It's like, why didn't you tell him that from the beginning? I was I think when it comes to athletes, they got to make sure that they vet their agents, before they sign with them, because they play a role financially. Their life. Take it.
Absolutely.
Important, definitely. Is there anything else on the trust before we get to the show? We didn't kind of touch on it a little bit, but I'll just wrap it up with this. As much as we talk about, trust between, the student athlete and coaches and student athletes and the NCAA, at the end of the day, and especially with football, because football is such a unique sport, and why I love it so much is because the amount of people you have to get to trust each other for one common goal, especially on the football field. And, me playing offensive lineman, being an offensive lineman, trust was everything for us. We had, all five of us had to trust each other every single play, every single step, every single block, because if one of us messed up, we all suffered from it. So just as much as we've talked about having trust in your coaches and the NCAA and stuff like that, you got to have that much trust, if not more, in your teammates, because at the end of the day, no matter what your coaches tell you and stuff like that, it's up to you to go on that field and perform. That coach can sit there and give you every game plan, every strategy, every technique, everything in the world they can give you. But it's up to you as the player to go out there and perform, because at the end of the day, you're representing yourself, not only just that school and the NCAA, you're representing yourself. So how would you feel about how you performed on that field alongside your teammates? Yeah. That trust, that teammate trust is important. If I ain't trust y'all, I don't know what I do. Offensive lineman. That's why I never came down on my life like that, because I'm like, we need to trust you at the end of the day. Definitely.
All right, fellas. That was another quick hour and a half. We want to take this time to wish our viewer and listening audience a very happy and safe holiday season. Love one another, stay safe, take excellent care of each other, and we will see you and hopefully have you join this discussion next week on House Talk Pregame. I'm Dr. Lauren Pitts, and my two amazing co-hosts, Jared Johnston and Ronnie Ransom. Happy holidays, gentlemen. Happy holidays, audience. We'll holler back at you next week. Same bat channel. Same.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.